Morale at NASA is perhaps at a 20-year low. Columbia was obviously a human tragedy and way worse than the budget is awful. But it's bad. We have to keep things together. This is a survival mode budget, but it's not clear that much is surviving. This is a frank share of Vice-Chair Nasa Apac, Grant Tremblay, on X recently about NASA's budget starvation. Obviously, this is the inevitable consequence that a national agency must face when it has been blackmailed by its main contractor, Boeing, for decades. It's unfathomable. Why was NASA willing to pay Boeing $5.1 billion to get an incompetent spacecraft, Starliner, which is notorious for long delays and a series of technical failures? Worse, keep in mind that this is not its final failure. NASA is facing new trouble with the Boeing Starliner. Find out everything in today's TechMap episode. But before we begin, let's subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with the latest space news. When is the earliest the Starliner might come back? NASA and Boeing recently have come up with some possibilities. According to Steve Stitch, manager of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, the absolute latest Starliner could return, with Wilmore and Williams would be mid-August.
You know, the big driver obviously is the handover that we have coming up between Crew 8 and Crew 9, which is in mid-August.
Ideally, they should come sooner, though.
You know, obviously a few days before that launch opportunity, we would need to get Butch and Sunny home on Starliner.
Of course, everything needs to be based on the data gathered from the tests. Thus, the end of July could be a feasible option.
We're really working to try to follow the data and see when's the earliest that we could target for undock and landing. You know, I think some of the data suggests optimistically maybe it's by the end of July, but we'll just follow the data each step at a time and then at the right time figure out when the right undock opportunity is.
So how close are they to the date? At the time I made this report, NASA and Boeing engineers were evaluating results from last week's engine tests at NASA's White Sands Test Facility in New Mexico, as the team works through plans to return the agency's Boeing Crew flight test from the International Space Station in the coming weeks. The ongoing ground analysis is expected to continue throughout the week. Working with a reaction control system thruster built for a future Starliner spacecraft, ground teams fired the engine through similar in-flight conditions the spacecraft experienced on the way to the space station. The ground tests also included stress case firings and replicated conditions Starliner's thrusters will experience from undocking to deorbit burn, where the thrusters will fire to slow Starliner's speed to bring it out of orbit for landing in the southwestern United States. Talking about what's next after the test, Stitch said, "We collected an incredible amount of data on the thruster that could help us better understand what is going on in flight. Next, our team has moved into engine teardowns and inspections, which will provide additional insight as we analyze the results and evaluate next steps." In parallel with the ground test review, integrated ground teams also are preparing for an in-depth agency flight test readiness review, which will evaluate data related to the spacecraft's propulsion system performance before its return to Earth. The date of the agency review has not yet been solidified, but they plan to discuss the testing and analysis work in detail during a media briefing next week. It sounds like both NASA and Boeing are demonstrating their determination to bring astronauts home at the end of this month. Additionally, they also committed not to repeat the same mistake on Starliner's fourth flight, Starliner's first official mission. "We're not going to go fly another mission like this with the helium leaks," Stitch, manager for NASA's Commercial Crew Program, said during a June 18th teleconference. Starliner was expected to start its first operational mission to the ISS in early 2025. Known as Starliner 1, it is manifested to carry at least 3 astronauts to the ISS for a normal 6-month mission. To get Starliner 1 taking place, the current vehicle must come back with the crew safely first. NASA and Boeing will then lay out all the work in front of them to figure out what the path forward is. There will likely be a lot of work to be done, especially because Starliner's performance on its crew flight test is very poor. As you know, Starliner was originally scheduled to return to Earth in mid-May, but an indefinite delay pushed the date to the end of July. This definitely is not boding very well for the first official mission in February 2025, which is simultaneous with the Crew 10 mission, NASA's 10th operational flight on Dragon. To be honest, SpaceX is scheduled to fly their Crew 10 mission late next summer, but the prep timeline has been accelerated to move it in parallel with Starliner 1. Thanks to that, in the emergency, Dragon would serve as a lifeboat for Starliner if it fails. However, with the current status of the Boeing spacecraft, NASA has to consider carefully the switch of both missions' timelines, which will cause traffic and internal schedules on the ISS to be disturbed. Or, although Starliner can be certified in time for the February mission, it would likely conduct just a handful of flights before NASA retires the space station in 2030. It could still be used to service the Orbital Reef orbiting station, led by principal partners Sierra Space Corporation and Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. However, this is a very ambitious project due to Orbital Reef's very large scale, with a pressurized volume of up to 830 cubic meters, roughly 3/4 of the ISS, the largest space station ever built. Building a space station of such size is inherently complicated, and this will be much more complicated if Blue Origin and Sierra Space rule out SpaceX and go with Starliner. I believe that Jeff Bezos is smart enough to know which one brings more benefits to him. These sparked the concern that Boeing would not fully fill out Starliner's manifest. There is even a rumor that Boeing will cancel the Starliner project soon, evidence that this giant group has the intention to sell its cash cow, ULA, to Blue Origin, as a way to eliminate its resources in the space sector. This way they can focus more on aviation, their main field. The failure of Boeing's Starliner is not something unfathomable, especially when you look at its dark, long history. Starliner is a rival of SpaceX's Crew Dragon in NASA's Commercial Crew program in 2014. While SpaceX, the inexperienced one, got its Crew Dragon to the finish line first and has carried 50 people to orbit since 2020, Boeing, a legacy company, stumbled right outside of the gate. It has continued toiling with Starliner, playing a veritable game of whack-a-mole to address one engineering problem after another. An only partly successful uncrewed test flight in 2019 saw the ship get to space, but failed to dock with the ISS. The second chance for Boeing Starliner, called Orbital Flight Test 2, an uncrewed demonstration mission, also had a rocky journey similar to its third test flight, Crewed Flight Test. It wasn't until May 2022 that the company launched a successful uncrewed test mission, slipping nearly 2 years compared to the initial schedule. The final challenge, named Boeing Crewed Flight Test, came as Boeing faced serial woes on its commercial aircraft side after 2 crashes of its 737 line in 2018 and 2019 respectively claimed 346 lives. And yet, a door blew off a 737 MAX jet during a flight in January 2024. A series of serious accidents forced Boeing to sit on the hot seat. As predicted, the 737 failed multiple Federal Aviation Administration audits in the wake of the incident. Much worse, 2 whistleblowers who had come out against the company regarding production and safety issues suddenly died, one on May 2nd of a severe infection and the other in March of an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound. Although Boeing did not assume any responsibility for the affair, the company has borne the brunt of public outrage. Perhaps to save its face, both NASA and Boeing's space divisions have tried to put the public off the scent with the Starliner launch. Finally, they took the vehicle off the ground successfully. But how to bring it back to Earth, perhaps? Both still cannot give the correct answer. It's possible that Starliner will stay in space until the end of the summer, but this will directly affect the schedule for its first official mission in February 2025. It's unclear whether NASA will certify the new spacecraft in time. Even if it did, it would likely conduct just a handful of flights before NASA retires the space station in 2030. Additionally, it could still be used to service the Orbital Reef orbiting station under development by Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin company. However, in September 2023, it was rumored that Blue Origin and Sierra Space were looking to end the Orbital Reef space station partnership. This sparks the concern that Boeing would not fully fill out Starliner's manifest. Anyway, how many missions Starliner will fly now is not the biggest concern, but whether it will be safe enough to bring people home or not. While things are still unclear, on July 15th, SpaceX was awarded $26,700 for Emergency Response Special Research. This follows the July 10th press conference. Steve Stick, program manager for NASA's Commercial Crew program, mentioned NASA had looked at Dragon contingency per Butch and Suni, waiting for Starliner to be cleared for return. This sparked speculation about Crew Dragon's urgent role in Starliner's CFT mission. Nevertheless, to respond, the agency explained that the study is not related to Starliner. NASA continuously explores a wide range of contingency options with our partners to ensure crew safety aboard the International Space Station. Over the past couple of years, the agency has worked with its commercial partner SpaceX to provide additional return capability on the Dragon spacecraft in the event of a contingency. To put it simply, it sounds like NASA is trying to figure out if a quick launch of Crew Dragon is possible in response to certain emergencies. NASA noted this does not mean anything is wrong with Starliner, but given what happened, NASA might want to keep its options open. To be honest, it's so good to always keep options open. NASA's manager of the program, Steve Stich, although denying rumors of plans to call on SpaceX for help, also did not completely deny that possibility. The beautiful thing about the commercial crew program is that we have two vehicles, two different systems, that we could use to return crew, he said. So we have a little bit more time to go through the data and then make a decision as to whether we need to do anything different. Assume that while the Starliner is bringing the astronaut home, but runs into trouble on the way down, similar to what happened on the way up, the Space Dragon could quickly mount a rescue mission. Frankly, with the current flight cadence of SpaceX's Dragon and Falcon 9, this might pose a bit of a challenge. An assembled rocket sitting in a hangar, fully tested, could be launched within a short time, maybe 24 hours, my guess. In the case of that, they are being launched as unmanned lifeboats. And of course, in launchable condition, you could take considerably higher risks, like skipping a wet dress rehearsal. Just get it on the pad, fuel it up, and if no flags come up during the countdown, you light the candle. If only one got ready to launch. But with the favorable external factors such as favorable weather and the crisis allowing for a few days, you could do some testing to increase your chance of a successful launch. These lead us to NASA's Emergency Response Special Research. Imagine you had a robust contingency setup to respond to unexpected situations efficiently. If a full contingency setup is in place, it can significantly reduce the time required to prepare for a launch, potentially bringing it down to single-digit hours. Clearly, it's not the first time NASA has come up with research about rescue missions. There was actually an exercise done to work this out at the direction of the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, CAIB. It comes from the pain caused by the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia. On Saturday, February 1, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia was lost and 7 NASA astronauts perished. NASA could have tried to launch Space Shuttle Atlantis on a rescue mission if they had known Columbia was going to disintegrate on re-entry. Yet, how would they have gotten the astronauts down? While Columbia was on orbit, Atlantis was undergoing preparations for a March 1st launch as STS-114. It would have been possible, albeit a difficult and demanding race against time, to launch Atlantis on a rescue mission. Columbia would have faced a 30-day mission limit, determined by its supply of lithium hydroxide scrubbers used to remove CO2 from the cabin atmosphere, and additional limits posed by food, water, and power supplies. Depending on when the decision was made to launch a rescue, Atlantis could have rendezvoused with Columbia as early as Mission Day 27, with the launch prep and flight crews working a brutal 24/7 schedule and no room for error or delays, but it was at least feasible. In the CAIB scenario, Atlantis would have launched with a 4-person crew of 2 pilots and 2 mission specialists to conduct the EVAs. Meanwhile, Columbia's crew would have powered down the orbiter and adopted a max conservation routine, essentially staying in their bunks as much as possible to conserve oxygen and minimize CO2. Once Atlantis rendezvoused with Columbia, the 2 EVA astronauts would have connected the orbiters with an extendable boom. They would transfer 2 EVA suits to Columbia, meeting 2 already suited Columbia astronauts and helping them transfer to Atlantis. The remaining astronauts would relay the EVA suits back and forth in a grueling 8-9-hour spacewalk. Finally, the last 2 crewmen would have set up Columbia for control from Houston. Atlantis would back away and prepare for re-entry. Columbia would be set up for deorbit and a final fiery re-entry, presumably to Point Nemo in the South Pacific, the most remote spot on Earth, and where the majority of controlled deorbitings are targeted. Close quarters, vehicles faster than the speed of sound, 0 gravity, and extremely volatile rockets. Just a small error can cause horrifying consequences, making space travel one of the trickiest work in the world. This requires careful calculations and even more careful actions when situations get tough. For that reason, not by chance, the public got upset when NASA approved the Boeing Starliner off the ground, with helium leaks and tons of hidden issues inside it. We are also worried about the safety of the astronauts on the return trip on this death trap, despite NASA's efforts to reassure the public. At present, what we read in the media is just about Starliner's latest issues. So, how about the previous ones? We acknowledge that the crew flight test is not Starliner's first failed mission. Keep in mind that it has a long, dark history of delays due to poor technical performance. Therefore, no one can be sure that all old troubles will never return in Starliner's upcoming journey. First of all, let's talk about a hot topic: parachute. One of two main reasons for the cancellation of Starliner's CFT mission in 2023. Indeed, in June 2023, soft links in the lines that run from Starliner to its three main parachutes were discovered to not be as strong as previously believed. This significantly decreases the overall safety factor of the parachute system. If one parachute were to fail during descent, the additional strain could potentially cause the lines connecting the remaining parachutes to snap, jeopardizing a safe landing. Boeing's program manager, Mark Nappy, emphasized that the parachute system is designed to allow for safe landings even with one parachute failure, but the current soft links do not meet the necessary safety requirements. Nevertheless, it's not the first time the parachute's error was found. In the pad abort test in November 2019, one of the three parachutes failed to deploy, and the capsule landed with only two parachutes. However, NASA deemed it to be safe and announced the test to be a success. This is very strange because they put the Dragon through a much more excruciating process of testing parachutes, but having a noticeable shift with a gradual relaxation of safety protocols on Starliner. As a result, 4 years later, the parachute problem still recurred, and we don't know if it will happen again on the upcoming Starliner mission with humans aboard. If so, it's truly a disaster for spaceflight. To better understand the dangers of parachute failure, let's remember the death of cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. He was one of Soviet Russia's first group of cosmonauts selected to attempt space travel, and also the first person to enter outer space twice. During the re-entry of Soyuz 1, the Soviets' first space vehicle intended to eventually reach the moon, the parachutes on the spacecraft were deployed but did not unfold correctly, making the spacecraft impossible to slow down. Soyuz 1 crashed into Earth on April 24, 1967, killing cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. Back to the case of Boeing Starliner, the concern for the astronauts' safety makes sense. Boeing is notoriously perfunctory in determining the root cause of any of its glitches, not only the parachute system. Can't help but mention the case of RCS thrusters, and the failure of these small thrusters in CFT just follows a similar mistake 4 years ago. The previous time was in the uncrewed OFT-2 mission, launched on May 19, 2022. Two Orbital Maneuvering and Attitude Control System, OMACS, thrusters failed during the orbital insertion burn, but the spacecraft was able to compensate using the remaining OMACS thrusters with the addition of the Reaction Control System, RCS thrusters. A couple of RCS thrusters used to maneuver Starliner also failed during docking due to low chamber pressure. The engineering team afterward tried to apply 2 small software fixes, but to no avail because they did not address the root cause. Starliner, one more time, failed to operate these attitude thrusters in the 2024 launch as a result. Hopefully, through the test at the White Sands, they can manage to find and completely fix the problem. Although this is not an indication that there are issues with Starliner's return capability, as NASA explained, it's always better to have a backup plan for worst-case scenarios. In that case, they could simulate a rescue mission of the uncrewed Soyuz MS-23 spacecraft, which was used to replace the coolant-leaking Soyuz MS-22 on the ISS. As the MS-23 arrived at the space station on 26 February 2023, the seat liner of one astronaut was transferred to the new Soyuz on 6 March, and the seat liners for 2 cosmonauts were moved from MS-22 to MS-23 on 2 March, ahead of their return in the Soyuz. They would presumably use Dragon as an emergency return vehicle as they did with Soyuz, and the launch window would be in mid-August when the handover between Crew 8 and Crew 9 happens. Obviously, they would not return Dragon with 6 unless there was another emergency that required it. Absent an emergency on board, the astronauts would be perfectly safe to remain on board for a while. They keep extra supplies on station just in case. Another option is to launch the next Dragon with 2 fewer crew members, and there will be 2 empty chairs for the Starliner crew. Or worse, if Starliner hits trouble on the way going down, NASA can apply what they researched in the Columbia Accident Investigation Board, CAIB. You can watch in detail about this in the video, Boeing Starliner. Finally coming back, NASA confirmed after requested SpaceX Dragon. However, keep in mind that it's just a study. As far as I know, they haven't applied into practice. Therefore, it would be very dangerous to let Starliner get into trouble again while it is bringing astronauts back to Earth, because we seem not to have any feasible solution for this case. It explains why the careful preparation and high responsibility of both NASA and Boeing in the current period play an extremely important role. Anyway, in my deep down, I wish both Wilmore and Williams all the best. They will come back soon and have a safe landing. When Starliner Commander Barry Butch Wilmore and co-pilot Sunita Williams arrived at the ISS on June 6th, after a dangerous long journey, they were very pumped, shaking their fists and giving their new crewmates some enthusiastic embraces. I was impressed with Suni's dance at that time, and deep down, I really desire to see her do it again on Earth. That day will come soon, perhaps by the end of this month, as the officials promise. The goal is to get them back before SpaceX delivers a fresh crew in mid-August, but that too could change, NASA's Commercial Crew Program Director Steve Stick noted. NASA test pilots Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams launched aboard Boeing's new Starliner capsule in early May. The first people to ride it, helium leaks and thruster failures almost derailed their arrival at the International Space Station and have kept them there much longer than planned. During the time on the ISS, Starliner underwent a thruster hot fire test alongside the astronauts to serve in evaluating thruster issues that interfered with Starliner's first ISS docking attempt on June 6th. Referring to the results, Steve Stick said, "Feeling very confident." He reiterated that 5 of Starliner's 28 reaction control thrusters failed during the final phase of the ISS rendezvous on June 6th, though 4 of them eventually came back online. One thruster was not fired during the test due to abnormally low pressure first observed during docking, and it will remain offline during the return to Earth. In addition, the helium leak was not a big problem because they had enough helium for 70 hours of free flight, and they only needed 7 hours worth of helium. And that just about wraps it up for today's episode. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time.